around. Did Larry say whether he's going to make it this morning?
He had hoped to, yes. Let me send him a text real quick.
Or if he forgot.
Just send him a text, wakey.
Well, I think I'm finally up to speed. I'm looking at too many statutes.
Yes, as have I. Gives you a headache.
We'll see if we are on the same page here.
Well, I think we'll go ahead and call the meeting order. Maybe Larry will come here in a minute or two. Okay, we're here for streets and curb and gutter. I'll let JR explain some things.
Okay, I'll start off with the first page that has all the letters and the original stuff that we had marked down as our priority list. It has all the letters on that map. It's the one that's the single one, in case there's any question. The total engineering estimate on that was $2.3 million for that entire deal, which obviously leaves us in the position of, well, we picked enough, but we have to cut it in about half. So that was the total cost. The 6 pages that follow that are stapled together are the breakdown of those. You don't need to spend a lot of time on those 6 pages, but we do, in the very back are the 2 options that I came up with, and of course we can look at the details based on those. So I may have 2 of them that fit the budget. Of course the budget is 1.2. Last 4 pages? Oh, okay, last 4 pages. So with the grant application that we're going for and the 50% match, we're trying to get a $1.2 million figure out of the total of the information. And the back 4 pages give those 2 options. The map is the front page, and then the breakdown of the costs is on the second page. And I do apologize for the lack of clarity on the second page. I got this information at 3:45 yesterday, so bear with me. It's all there. It's just a matter of not having enough time to clean it up really good. The second page that shows all the monetary amount, the first column, of course, corresponds with the map, the very first map that I referred to. The second column refers to the cost to do that block. You'll notice on the top column there's a $65,000 figure. That is included no matter what we do. That's the mobilization, traffic control, and reseeding. That's just part of the overall no matter what we do on the project. And that number probably would be lower based on the fact we're scaling back some, but not by a lot. You know, there's still a single mobilization, which I think accounted for like 50,000 of that. So anyway, that figure's in there no matter what. The second column on that page picks out what corresponds with the map that's right on front of that. So when you add that column up, the very bottom of it, that gives you the figure that I come up with for that option. And of course, curb and gutter is the far right one, and that one has been separated out. It is included in that column. In other words, the total budget number is say on the. I'm sorry, you need to pick which one's the first one.
Here's it here. You got it all here.
What's that?
You've got it all here, I think. And then these 2 added together.
No.
All right.
This is the total project. So there again, that goes back to that clarity, and I apologize. So this column right here, let's make sure we're on this one. The one that has
C and G.
Yeah, we got on 38. So let's go with the one that's 20,000 on the C&G. That's the curb and gutter.
That's the 4th page.
Sorry, mine is not stapled together. So it's this one, the C&G, $20,790. Okay. So for that one, this column is the total of that project. This column is the curb and gutter. This is already included. This is the total number including the curb and gutter. This is the curb and gutter just subtracted out for what we're talking about assessing back to them. And then, of course, the option 2 is set up exactly the same way, so that you don't add anything. The total project cost cut down is that center column for each one. Obviously, the reason for picking these 2 options is trying to keep the work in a closer area for constructability, and to try to do the most prioritized work, which is obviously drainage, is a high priority. I couldn't find a third option, and I did work on this last night a while that made any sense to me to do it, so I really do believe these are the 2 options to pick from as far as prioritizing this.
These are the options for the first project?
Yes.
2020?
That's correct. So if we get into a phase 2, it would just be the other half of this project, because this essentially is 2 projects worth of street work. So it's phase 1, I guess, essentially, to look at it that way. So the next ones would be the first priority. I honestly don't think one is better than the other. I really don't. I mean, because I put the priorities as far as the drainage on both of them, and then I just separated out the ones that I thought, we could buy time on. So, I mean, honestly, there is not a reason to pick one over the other from my standpoint. If curb and gutters, being the greater issue on the one is something you want to factor into that, of course, that's why I put the figure on that. And, of course, we have to decide, whether we're fully assessing that back to them or how we're dealing with that. I mean, it's pretty obvious, this doesn't cover a lot of area for that kind of money. I think it's really important to keep in mind we're talking about getting half of this paid for by a grant. So we're looking at a city burden of $600,000 to get this work done. And I think it's really important that if we're going to put this stuff out there, that's what we're talking about, that we're applying for a grant. Because when you look at the total figure and what it's costing for what we're covering, that's kind of a hard pill to swallow.
You might explain the colors.
The colors? Oh, I'm sorry. So on this list, so the blue is 6 inches of complete replacement. It all corresponds there. The yellow is a mill and overlay. In other words, we just mill the surface off, patch whatever needs to be patched, and then overlay 2 inches of mat over it, rematching it at the gutter line. The red is concrete. The concrete on either one of those options is quite significant on Angle Road. Of course, that's a large number. That's why I scaled that down so much. Something to be said on Angle Road is we have that bridge at the end of Spencer Street. We're going to leave a 300-foot gap in there if that gets done this year or the next phase or whatever, to deal with that bridge. That bridge elevation is too low, and it could take up to the 300 feet. I don't think we want to do any surfacing in that specific area prior to dealing with that bridge that's not up to capacity, I guess is what it comes down to.
How are you going to have grade on both ends?
What's that?
How are you going to set your grade on both ends if the bridge is too low?
Well, because we'll have the ability to rise, because everything else, like the overflood of it, goes around to the railroad tracks now towards the plant. So if we have that where we could rise that as little as 1 or 2 feet in 300 feet, we shouldn't have any problem. In fact, we'll probably come much closer, but we thought 300 feet gives a lot of latitude as far as...
You can take care of it within the 300 feet.
Within design, yes, because you have to be really careful because you could be building a dam there.
Right.
But it gives us room for lots of options. At first, we started at 150 feet, and we thought, well, why not just give the full area, because you either spend an hour later on that concrete. The obvious reason for doing that in concrete is traffic. I mean, just traffic, and water overrun, because that we can change that a little bit down there where it settles really bad, but it's just a really heavy haul road, and I think that's there's no curb and gutter there also. That was the second reason for going concrete, is there's no way to hold those edges. They either grow in, they break out, so that's why that one is that way. The North Scott being the B, that's half that block. That is a major waterway. That's, you know, 1.5 to 2 feet deep in the middle of the street when it's running. The right side of that was replaced some years back, not too long before I got here. The left half of it had not been completed. It's pitted as deep as 4 inches. Extremely important place to get done. It's not going to fail within the first cycle, but it's just a really high priority because of the waterway. Francis Street, that would be L, down there by Parkway. That one is, of course, included in both sets. That street is gone. I mean, it's just patches at this point. Obvious reason for it being concrete is it's too flat. It's always covered with gravel. It's always got water standing on it. If we have a concreted surface, it's easier to keep clean. It's easier to keep standing water off, and it doesn't break down like asphalt does. S, that is the center of Parkway. That's where we've got the trickle from the highway that eats it up. One issue we're going to have with both of these areas is timing because of salt. But that one is to preserve the investment we put in of probably 9 to 10 years ago of doing Parkway Drive. Of course, we had said at that time, when we did have breakdown of the center of the street, we'd just pour a concrete pan in it. So we bought some time. Well, now is the time to put that in. If that had ever break through the center of that, again, that's as bad as that North Scott property as far as water is concerned. Something that also goes into these two options, just because we pick it, doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. We have yet to apply to the state with these options and justify that these streets serve the LMI population in some way. So we have to word that properly, get it to Justine. She gets it to the state, and they give it the thumbs up or the thumbs down in any given area. So this may be a pick and choose thing too. We're getting some examples on how to word that, how to apply for, that, because that would be our next hurdle if we pick one of these options that could then potentially change it.
Why is sitting there going, timing.
I think that covers what I've brought. The final issue is the trees. The pictures. Those things also correspond with the letters on those things. These are no small thing
I'm sorry, guys. I should have just walked.
to the construction or to the cost of the property owner, depending on how that's dealt with. These are all 4 extremely large, healthy trees, very old, but also extremely destructive to the streets. These streets cannot be dealt with without dealing with these trees. Pick G, for instance. That's one of them that kind of comes to mind. It's a great big maple tree that's right there just south of the grade school on Denison Street. If you look at the curb line on that thing has heaved the street up for probably 40 feet. So first off, the tree has to be removed, it has to be regraded, and then curb and gutter has to be replaced. That's a lot of expense. And again, I'm not implying we need to do one way or the other. It's a very large part of a half block to get done in that single item. Those trees are in the city right away. I believe we have the right and ability to require and make them be removed. Of course, the question comes into place. You're regrading a whole street. Where's that cost go? I mean, curb and gutter is significant, but that tree is probably going to, because it's what causes the curb and gutter issue, it's probably going to triple the price of dealing with these areas. There is a block J. There's 2 of these that are on J. That's Denison Street. That's a primary drainage area, possibly our worst street in town. 2 trees on 1 property owner. Exact same thing. It affects the entire edge of the property. I just want us to not take these lightly before we talk about the curb and gutter and that kind of thing. That's why I brought these to your attention. But yes, they are all in the city right away, and of course affecting the city streets.
But but cost for removing these trees is not in your curb and gutter
No.
deal. Is it even in anything?
No, I sent him the pictures of these. He said it's best to try, to attempt to deal with these things, like have them removed and ground out. No, that, I don't think that cost is in there. He has contingency costs for things. I can't imagine in any given street that's going to cover, removing of the roots, repacking, redoing the base, and actually dealing with the roots that go far into the street. So,
We're still doing the 1 cent tax, right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's coming up. That's up to you, if you vote to do it.
Well, yeah.
And the community votes to do it.
so I guess we'll go to questions as to the two options and the features that go along with them, if there are any.
Thing back on the trees, do we allow trees to be planted in the city's right of way now? To avoid this problem happening in 50 years?
No, I mean, it was done by Rob at the school, right in front of the pool. I mean, it's certainly something that should be addressed long-term. We plant them ourselves on
Those trees.
Main Street. What's that?
Yeah.
No, we don't. Maybe we should. That might be a good time to think about that, but,
Well, or maybe the kind of tree.
yeah.
I mean, these are elms.
Mhm. Actually, you've got a cottonwood, a locust, and and a maple.
Maple,
Yeah,
yeah.
actually, that one might be an elm on the north J. One of the questions is on the protest on the curb and gutter. Mike's talking, if there's a protest of 50% of the landowners, is that within the block? It's the entire block. So this one person is only 25% of that. So they'd have to talk their neighbor into, not wanting, okay. All right. Two of these, like I said, I think I mentioned this, sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I'm still working out my presentation to you guys. Two of these blocks being Denison and Benton. And actually, well, Francis doesn't have that much of it, but Denison and Benton on the north side of Washington are Sawhill Park. Those would be county curb and gutters. I had talked to them at one time about this. They said, get us a number. That's been a very long
They
time.
can afford a damn pickup for the appraiser's office, they can afford it.
It was a free hand-me-down.
Free hand-me-down because they didn't.
I mean, not second-hand, we're third-hand. Went through the sheriff and then...
Now you got a pretty
You're
defensive.
pretty sensitive on this. I mean, you're driving up and down Main Street like you're pretty proud of it.
I'm not beating up my own vehicle, so I am proud of it.
Is all of this contingent on the
Grant.
residents or the owners with the curb and gutter first?
50% can protest it.
Yeah, but I mean, so that's got to be done before.
Let's go through that process.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got several things that we've got to deal with.
Okay, real quick, on these two different options,
Yes.
have you talked to Justine as far as what would be more favorable as far as the grant application, or either or?
We're just working with them out yesterday, Justine, and yesterday to Tyler, who are both sending us examples of successful grant applications as to the LMI being served for these things.
Okay.
So we hope to be able to, we knew we couldn't do Sunny Hill because of LMI. Here, I think we have access to emergency services. You have an area, that the entire area should be LMI, so just general access. But again, we don't have those examples, so I hate to, speak to what we're going to say, but we think it certainly qualifies for the LMI, but it has to have the importance of serving them, other than just them getting a new street, is my understanding.
Yes. And when I look at these, I think we could probably justify either one of
Either one,
these.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, 'cause like the Angle Road is just a primary in and out to the entire city. I don't think that one has an issue. The drainage could damage all other streets that, provide good streets for LMI. Then the individuals are actually in neighborhoods that account for it, and especially where they're together like that. I mean, if all the streets are bad at once, that makes no sense to, they have no good access, I guess you can kind of say. So hopefully we'll come up with those explanations, and our options will be one or two of whichever one you choose we want to go with. And being that it's a phase one and a phase two, again, I don't see one over the other. I really don't. They both include the controversial blocks, or not controversial, but the ones that can be problematic, at least for individuals. So that's just the factor no matter what. Those streets are so bad, they have to be dealt with the first year, in my opinion. It would be ridiculous to overlook them in the first phase.
And when you talk about phase one and phase two, potentially what the city's looking at are phases 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Absolutely.
I think in prior discussions that the council's had, I think there's obviously the consensus that we're going to have some elections. And Lila, and visiting with Justine, and kind of has established, I think, October 8th as the day that we're going to have the special election. I think there's been some discussion that we would have a special election on two questions. The first would be the sales tax, and the second would be the issuance of the bonds. In thinking about this and visiting with Gilmore and Bell, they think that probably if we have two different questions, that it could complicate things. And as a practical matter, if one passes and the other doesn't, neither one of them go, right? So I think that the consensus is we'll just have the election on the issue of sales tax. Because if it passes, then, obviously we're going to be telling people, as we talk about issuing the bonds, that obviously the reason for the bonds are to be paid for with the sales tax, okay? So the sales tax election, we're probably looking at again, October the 8th. With that, you'll have to pass a resolution. That'll, basically set it for election. The statute 12-187 allows for sales tax to be used for street improvements. So basically, we're going to fit into that. We shouldn't have any problem there. There's some question now as to how much lead time the county clerk needs in order to get the ballots and notices out. He's indicated that he needs at least 90 days to notify the state. That's the 90 days is set forth as far as a general election. Gilmore and Bell thinks that probably all we're going to need is 45 days, but we're still looking, I think, at doing all of this at the July 8th meeting, just to get it set out. Again, hopefully we'll have a resolution for you to look at and approve on July 8th, and then we'll start publication. Again, basically telling the city that we're calling an election to to institute a 1-cent citywide sales tax for the purpose of utilizing the proceeds there for infrastructure, specifically streets. We think we'll be fine there. Question has arisen, I think, with Lila and the fact that when can we start basically collecting this sales tax. She's done some research. I think probably we have to give the Secretary of Commerce, or whoever it is, basically, 90 days?
Yes.
So if we have an election in October, probably we're not going to be able to start collecting it on January 1 like we'd like to of 2020, but rather we'll have to wait till the second quarter. Is that kind of
That's my understanding, yes.
So that's the sales tax. We're going to have an election there. Everybody, I think, is in agreement with that.
Yeah, right.
How effective are mail ballots?
They're more expensive. Kind of, I think, the thought was we could do mail ballots, but I think now it's pretty well been thought that we would propose that we have a regular election.
Okay, so the mail ballot
It's kind of out, yeah.
Okay.
I think for that question, and they're more expensive, and you're spending a lot of money with postage and everything else, and you have to wait further in order to canvass. It's just going to kind of slow things down and be expensive. So I think we're thinking about having one polling place, the courthouse, a normal 7 to 7 hours for the election. Okay? Again, that's kind of what the thought is. You'll have to all approve it, but that's kind of where we're going. Bonds, okay. KSA 15731 basically allows the city for improvements to issue bonds. If you recall, and I'm sure you all do, you probably were thinking about it as you were having your coffee this morning, back in 2018, you adopted a charter ordinance basically exempting us from the provisions of that, which under the old statute, 15-731, we had to have an election in order to be able to issue the bonds. What the charter ordinance did was essentially exempt us from having to have an election if by resolution, basically you advise the populace that in fact you're going to issue the bonds, you state the amount that is not to exceed and the purpose of those bonds. And of course, basically we would say that we're going to issue bonds not to exceed, 2.5, I think is what we decided, or
1.2, I thought.
excuse me?
I thought it was just for this project, the 1.2.
Yeah, we're going to do it 1.2, I guess is what we said. And not to exceed 1.2, and that the purpose of it would be for infrastructure. We publish that, we have to publish it for 2 times in the local paper, and within 30 days after the last publication, it's subject to protest. If 10% of the qualified electors would basically protest it, then you're looking at a situation where you've got to then put it to an election. Remember the pool, how we did that. If you recall, when we issued the bonds, we had the same authority, and we went out and the city itself prepared the protest petitions. You remember that? We sent them out at the bank, and when people would come in, we wanted to make sure that it went to an election. I don't think we're going to take it that far this time. Basically, we're going to publish, we're going to let them know that we're subject to protest within 30 days following the last publication by 10% of the qualified electors, and then if that's the case, it will go to a vote. I think everybody agrees that the key to this, as far as the public is concerned, is we're going to have to do a good job explaining to them what the hell we're doing. And that, essentially, there's no question that the infrastructure needs to be looked at, no question that we've got to pay for it. So do you pay for it by raising property taxes? Or do you pay for it in a more, maybe, fair way in sales tax? So I think it's going to be incumbent upon us that with the newspaper or whatever, we get the story out. Okay, so again, hopefully we'll have a resolution basically saying that we're going to issue potentially $1.2 million in bonds for phase 1 of this project, and that they have 30 days to file a protest. 10% of the qualified electors, what that means is whatever the number was of people that voted in the last city election, 10% of that. So depending upon the turnout, it could be a high number or a low number. Okay? Any questions there? Okay, the next question then is, depending upon what you guys decide is going to be encompassed by phase 1, is we have to give notification in the paper by resolution that in fact we are going to improve these streets. The Kansas statutes basically give the city wide latitude as to how that's paid for. First of all, the first ordinance 12601 basically says you have the authority to do it, and you have the authority to make the adjoining property owners be liable for it. Part of it, all of it, the city has the right to pay for it all. So really, you've got full latitude as to how you apportion the cost. Again, though, you have to publish by resolution what we're going to include in the first phase 1 and what we anticipate the cost to be, total cost, along with how it's going to be apportioned. Once that's published, then 50% of it only has to be published once. but then within 30 days after that publication, 50% of the affected property owners can file a protest.
On the publication and the protest, I think we need to double check that because I think, my understanding it was the other way around, that this one needed to be published twice and the other one once. But it's still just going to be a matter of
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah.
And then the protest period, 20 days and 30 days.
You're right, charter, the bonds one time, and the street improvements 2 times, and then 30 days following that second publication.
And 20 days for one of them is 20 days. I think it's the deadline for the protest of the street improvements. I have in my notes that it's 20 days.
Yeah.
Okay,
12602.
yeah.
Again, it's anticipated that we'll have these resolutions, once you guys decide on the scope of the project, available for you to pass on July 8th. The question becomes, what happens to this whole process if a protest is filed?
That might be Jen.
Hmm?
That might be Jen.
That's people with the torches coming to file a protest.
It is Friday morning, they're throwing rugs
Oh,
around.
yeah.
Then again, if we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know what's going to happen. I think
There's no way of
that
knowing.
gives us-
Yeah, we gotta start somewhere.
Plus, who doesn't want the street fixed? I don't know anybody that doesn't want the street
It's
fixed.
that poor property owner that's got to remove that tree.
Well, I think the city should pay for that.
It's an option.
Yeah. We're forcing it to be done, so
2 questions. Are we confident that the sales tax will...
If you were Jim.
I understand that. Are we confident that the sales tax will cover the bonds
Yes.
over a
the
certain
pr-
time?
yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Okay, but then what happens when we roll into stage 2?
It'll cover both. So by an amortization with the given interest rate at the time we was talking about it, the 1 cent would cover roughly a 1.8 if it all went to retiring bonds
Okay.
when we first looked at that. And obviously, we need to revisit that, but I know it was 1.8 was 1 cent over, some information that we got from the bond people.
I think Clyde had done that. Of course, that's based upon past experience and past receipts. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but these are general GO bonds. If sales tax doesn't increase it, the bondholders are still going to expect to be paid.
Yeah. So you're looking at this covering stage 2, stage 3,
2.
just 2? Because of...
2.5.
The sales tax will continue.
Yes.
Yeah, it will
And
continue.
it's going to be, the ballot's going to, the election question is going to be that this will continue and will be used for maintaining city infrastructure, including streets. I think this is, basically, it's a way to make sure that we have enough money to continue to make the improvements, whether it be electrical, streets, or otherwise.
And to maintain after they're made.
So if you did
After the improvements are made.
Say if you applied for phase 1 and 2, then there is actual, if history repeats itself on the sales tax, then there's money that could be directly spent if they aren't
Yes.
available. It isn't just exactly the 1.2, it's a little more.
Okay.
Each year, the city would have to pass a resolution to issue more bonds, because phase 1.2, it might cover 2 phases, but we might not get the grant. So then it's only going to cover the first phase. But each year, then we would have to publish that we are going to issue bonds, and each year we subject protest.
And then the second question I've got is, and if I understand things right, the curb and gutter is going to be entirely the resident's responsibility?
That's your decision. You haven't made that decision yet.
That's how it currently stands in street, or, with a property owner.
That's been the history and the procedure in the past.
I'll be honest, I have a real problem with that. I don't think that's right.
I agree. I think the city should take that on. It's not, you're forcing a citizen to pay for something that
I-
is part of the street, part of the water flow, and if you're gonna force something on someone, I feel like the city should pay for it. And I think the penny might cover it. I mean, long-term it probably would. It would, right? Penny tax. And out of this project, there's, what, 48,000 in curb and gutter, or 58,000 total? I mean, that's not a lot. I mean, it's not a lot, really. It's just curb and gutter you're looking at for the city to pay for.
The problem is our ordinance states that it is the,
Well, I know it states that now, but we can change it.
but I've been here 4 years, and we've already had one person since I've been here come and have it assessed. The city paid for it, and they're
Right.
paying it back with interest.
Right.
So how is that fair to him that he had to pay for it, and now we're just going to say, well, the city's going to assume that responsibility? I think we got to stick with what our ordinance states, and it's your responsibility. Sorry that it,
Well, at some point, all laws change, though, and they go into effect, and things that happen to people prior, it's just the way it is sometimes. I don't know. I feel like maybe we can look back just a year or two and help those people out a little bit, in a way, because there's not that many, I think, that's been done, right? I don't know.
And it goes back, since Roger and I have been on here a lot of years.
Well, I don't mean going back that far, but
Yeah, there's
it's
a lot
hell
of
of a
people
burden
that
for
pay
some
for their
people.
curb and gutter themselves or on a tax roll, but
is it fair? So I own 2 properties that happen to both be corner lots, so I've got both sides.
Yeah, that's
So is
right.
it fair for somebody that has 25 foot of curb and gutter to have to pay for my 2 corner lots? Because essentially, if the city pays for it, all of the citizens are.
Right, everybody pays for it. Eventually, somebody's going to have their curb and gutter done.
But is it fair for you with your 25 foot in front of your shop to have to help pay for my
Well, if it's
140 by 75 and 140 by 50?
Absolutely. If it's part of the penny tax or whatever, or if we do a small increase in our utility, or is there anything where we generate funds in water and sewer or whatever? It's a small amount for everybody. I think I'm fine with that, honestly. Man.
I feel that I bought 2 corner
I don't know.
properties, that it's my responsibility. I don't want anybody else to have to pay. I mean,
True.
I bought those, that's my responsibility.
Yeah.
That,
If you do it in the way that you're talking about, Gil, the only true way to do that is a mill levy increase, because when you're talking a utility rate, it makes no
Yeah.
sense to do water, sewer, anything else. It's a street,
Yeah.
and the street is funded primarily, it's subsidized by the utilities, but it's funded primarily by the tax, the mill levy. So
Yeah.
if you really, in those terms of what you're just saying, the mill levy would be the place to offset that. The only one that would make sense to me.
Or we just go to the penny tax would possibly cover it long term. I don't know.
Well,
I-
the
I
city
would
gave
have two
a
comments.
portion, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
two
portion
comments.
of it.
It's fine if you make
You're
money
increasing the
and you can afford it.
value of that person's property, number one. Number two is you've got all kinds of latitude as to how you necessarily have to pay for all of it. They can pay for half of it, they can pay for 3/4 of it. This is a special, you guys have the ability to make whatever decisions you want to as far as the portion of the cost.
Because up at Sunny Hill, they may have nice sidewalks and curbs, but they're gonna have to replace the whole thing.
Right.
That's, just because. So that's what is bad for them.
Yeah. I guess I'm more concerned about people on a fixed income
Fixed
or
income.
lower income, or that's a lot of money for somebody that just has a regular minimum wage job. They can't afford that. Maybe we can look at special situations. I don't know how that would work.
Can't do that.
Yeah, that wouldn't work. I don't know.
But is it something that, being so the city is requiring, if we're going to do the streets and we have to have the curb and gutter done, could it be cost shared?
Yeah.
A quick question in reference to people being able to afford it. What is the time limit on assessments to be paid out? What about, it's talk about easing the burden, what if, how long can that be put on there, say that, I don't know, I guess is that?
I'm not sure, I think it's 5 to 7 years. Did we?
Seems like it. I would have to look though.
Yeah, I would have to look again.
So 7 is the maximum.
Protest period is.
I'm not sure. I know 4 years is what we used for, I'm pretty sure it was 4 years for Heartland.
So there's
Not
no
Heritage.
Heartland,
latitude.
Heritage.
Because
And
we
they
gave
pay
them
interest.
the option of 4 or 5.
Yes, that's right, we did.
And yeah.
Excuse me?
I thought with Heritage, we gave them 4 or 5 years, and
They chose
they
4.
4 years, I think.
So 5 may be the maximum, but I'd have to confirm that.
And they pay interest on that?
Mhm. I don't know what the interest rate is.
It was pretty low.
It's low rate,
Yeah.
It's really low.
We're gonna need a decision, I think today, on how you're gonna apportion the cost.
And they're out there on the Angle Road,
Mhm.
is there a curb and gutter out there? Okay, that's what I was,
Part of the reason for the concrete.
okay.
If we left the curb and gutter still the responsibility of the property owner, which has been forever. I mean, I really feel sorry for this person on J with them 2 big trees. I mean, that adds on $10,000, taking out 2 of the big trees. But maybe that's where we could hopefully there's not too many areas like that through town that we help out the property owner on those trees. You know, because there's going to be some more around town somewhere once we start doing all these other streets too. But maybe we still say responsibility of the property owner for the curb and gutter as always, but since there's a tree there, and I'm kind of like Roger, maybe we better start looking into the fact that those trees should be planted. And of course, those trees have been there for 100 years, but they shouldn't be planted that close on the right-of-ways and stuff. To keep from that happening 50 years from now, some other streets having that problem.
And essentially, that right-of-way is a utility right-of-way.
Isn't it our practice, if a tree is
Interfering
near
with
the
electrical lines.
power lines, we take them down? We don't want independent statements.
To the point that a tree trimmer can safely take them down. We do not go in yards, we do not remove them. We make it to where they can safely remove them, and it is their responsibility to remove trees that are a problem. We only make it safe for them to do that work.
Royce Neitzel. Royce Neitzel.
Mhm. And we've gone to extremes in doing so. But the work on these is not just the removal, it's all the redigging stuff. So anyway.
Well, I agree with Scott. I think we should leave it the way it is on curb and gutter. We probably ought to try to figure out somehow to help with the cost on the tree removal.
Well, you don't have to decide the tree issue right now.
But it's related to the curb and gutter cost.
What?
We should
It's
pay for
related
the
to
trees.
curb and gutter.
Sure.
No, not in your figures.
It should be part of the project, getting those trees out.
Yeah, it's not in the curb and gutter cost.
It's not at all.
Trees, you guys are paid the big bucks.
Well, do I hear a motion to leave the curb and gutter assessment to the property owner the same as it has been?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second
Okay, then moved by Amanda and second by Roger. Guess we need to vote on it. Cale? Amanda?
Yes.
All good?
Right, yes.
Derek?
No.
Larry? No. Okay. So now what's our next document?
I think we're going to open up a can of worms. I know we're picking out what streets we're going to redo, but how is it fair that the city's going to replace the curb and gutter on these particular areas, but we're not going to do it for everybody? I think we're just opening the can that,
Let's go back to a situation that we had within the last year where there was some damage to a curb and gutter and the city ended up paying for it. But yet, according to what our rules are or whatever,
The ordinance says.
the ordinance, it should have been the resident's responsibility.
But it was determined that was done on snow removal.
I understand that.
You know, you take somebody like Heritage down there, that greatly enhanced the property on the west side of his building at a fairly low interest rate to do the improvement. So they gained something out of it as a property owner would. The removal of these trees and this curb and gutter here certainly enhance the property. I think I know where this is at. Trying to
What are you
figure
going to do
that
in a
out.
situation where you get a petition from property owners saying, we want our curb and gutter replaced? You can do that, they can apply to the city to have that done.
At their expense,
No.
Well, they're going to say no,
They
you
would
did it for all
say
the
that
other
we
people.
want it done at our expense.
Well, we should have it done if it needs to be done, if it's a water flow issue or a damage issue, obviously. That's something that JR could assess.
I'm sorry, on what was that? I just heard my name.
Oh, if a owner wants their curb and gutter replaced,
Uh-huh.
like it's got a little crack here and there, but there's no real damage or structural issues at all, they can't have it done just for aesthetic purposes. You'd have to say, okay, yeah, this needs replaced.
You have to have a permit.
Yeah. Or if we do this, the
So-
city pays for it.
So do we then, and just devil's advocate, so say we pay for these things, and then the people who obviously have bad curb and gutter with the streets fine, then put a request for them to have the city pay for it, because they don't pay for them, where it is broke up. And it's just a thought.
Yeah. And
Because
we
that
look
gets
at it.
significant too. I
Right,
think.
there could be a lot of requests.
It's just the, I guess that's a can of worms factor, is where
Right.
we stop it.
How much have we been replacing on an annual basis, you think?
Of curb and gutter.
Yeah.
It's based on the landowner doing it, because we have not forced people to do it.
Right.
Like, Heritage Lumber, that was their call, and then they.
But
asked
we know
us.
who's been doing it though, right? Because we
Yes.
gotta be sure it's done right,
Right,
to
correct.
spec.
Yes.
Maybe we should look at how many people have, or how much we've spent, or they've spent in the last few years, or how many linear feet we've gone through, and if that's only 20,000 a year, then why are we even worried about it? We can
Back in,
drop that in
when
a
was it,
second.
like the mid-nineties, when the council went around, or the council identified all the bad curb and gutter, and they were marked. And then, the homeowner was responsible to replace it. Lanny Kresinger came in and gave a price
A bid that he would
that,
do it.
that he would do them for this price. If people, or people could do it themselves, as long as it was up to specs, or they could hire a local contractor.
Mhm.
It was all done at the expense of the homeowner. And that was that encompassed the whole town at the time, remember?
Well, it's available to everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Some middle ground guys would be cost share on the curb and gutter, given the fact that these are special circumstances that the city has not imposed before. You can basically use that probably as a basis to say, okay, given the fact that this is being kind of forced on you, we agree that the property owner will pay 75% of it, or whatever percentage you come up with. But again, it's slippery slope, guys. We did have everybody,
You're gonna have everybody wanting to.
Well, we could have an annual limit too.
so I,
How
we
you
can
gonna
draft
pay?
an ordinance.
Yeah, you'd have to write up a whole ordinance and with all kinds of details to do it.
you're talking about people that could come forward and say, we want our curb and gutter done, but does it have to be okay right at that point? Could there be a time frame attached to it? I guess I don't understand.
I really haven't given it a lot of thought. I think you're just opening.
Do we need to be more, from this point going forward, do we need to be more proactive as far as
Infrastructure.
every year go, okay, mark the curb and gutter that needs replaced, notify the homeowners going, kind of like property cleanup, that we start getting on top of it and instead of waiting until it gets really bad and then saying, oh, now what do we do?
Amanda, I think that applies over the board as far as infrastructure. That's what we're dealing with
You
right
think-
now.
But yeah. I think maybe as a city, we can look at that so we can start getting the ball rolling that, you know, the homeowners need to help.
I don't know that we have to pay the whole thing, but I'm kind of more towards the cost share type thing. Just to throw them something saying, hey, we're gonna kick in too, and, you
Yeah.
know, even if it was 25%, just,
But it's
Would-
still not fair to the person that already has done it,
Mhm.
paid for his.
Is there,
He's gonna say, well, I paid for mine, how come you're doing this now?
And it's not fair for the person that lives on this block that doesn't need their streets repaired, but this person does. I mean, how do you draw the line? I just don't know how you do it.
But it's also been discussed with, or gave as an example, of would there be a way to reimburse him for part of that at some
Oh,
point?
God, no, don't go down there.
I know, Mike, I'm
Just
just
don't
saying.
go there.
Yeah, because then you could go back 20, 30, 40 years reimbursing people, and we don't want to go there.
No, we don't.
You are stewards of the taxpayers' dollars for the whole city.
Still, the ordinance states that it's the homeowner's responsibility. Even if we cost share, we're then again spreading the love to everybody. The citizens of St. Francis are paying for it one way or the other. Now, whether or not you pay for yours and he pays for his, and that's part of being a homeowner to me. You take on that responsibility and those expenses.
And the response to that is, rather than putting the cost of paying these bonds back on the property owner by increasing property taxes, essentially what you're doing is you're instituting what you think is a more fair sales tax that everybody, whether you're a property owner or not, has to pay, whether you're a resident of St. Francis or not, you have to pay. So, and again, I don't know, you just gotta be careful.
Wouldn't that cover what little amount of curb and gutter we do every year in that one penny?
I guess you can argue that, it's just,
I know it's the whole
I mean, you're looking at
history
this
thing.
figure for how many blocks?
Right.
And you figure you open it up that you're gonna pay for these 5 or 6 blocks curb and gutter, then you're gonna open it up to these 60 blocks of paying for curb and gutter, and then this number gets
Oh, yeah, I know.
multiplied
If we
significantly.
look at it all at once, yeah.
and it might be a moot issue because you might have a protest by the property owners.
Sure.
And then we're back to square one.
As far as the curb and gutter goes, is there a certain number that would have to protest before?
50%.
Of the block.
50%?
So there's basically, there's typically 4 owners in a block, on a side block, and of course, that's completely different on a facing block. In other words, 2 property owners on a side block would meet the threshold. You follow what I'm saying? Wait a second, okay.
I'm assuming nobody around this table has a conflict with owning property or having an interest in any property involved in this. No.
So the maximum burden any one property owner having being 1/4 of the block by footage is roughly $4,500 if they needed the entire thing.
If they needed the entire thing.
If.
correct?
And that's the iffy on the pictures as to that cost. And I'm just trying to put in perspective the maximum a single property could be burdened with.
In this case, we're looking at another, how much in tree removal?
More than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying I think we could still leave the curb and gutter as is, but we would help them with the tree situations. Especially this property, Jay's got 2 of them on it. That even makes it, but if we could help them out by doing that much of it, because, yeah, there's a easy $2,000 per tree there, not bad. on those kind of trees.
That's Gabe's, isn't it? That's Joanne's on the corner.
Is this any different? Say you bought this piece of property here and looked at it. When you say, well, that's gonna be expensive, I don't know if I wanna buy that or not. No different than when you buy a piece of property that's in the bottom of the flood stream. Is it our responsibility to keep water off of somebody's property? Or is it our responsibility to fix up this curb and gutter? If you own that property, you bought it, no difference if you buy a house and it's got a bad roof, or if you buy, you gotta look at everything when you purchase this property.
I agree.
A lot of times the reason a person buys that corner property is because they don't want a neighbor next, right, be sandwiched between somebody. So they buy a corner property. Well, corner property is always more valuable than a piece in the middle.
More snow to scoop in the wintertime and.
There's more
Yeah.
expense to
Yeah.
a corner property, no matter where you live.
Mhm.
And,
I don't have curb and gutter, why should I pay for somebody's curb and gutter?
Why should somebody else have to pay for my two corner lots? I should have to pay for them, it's my choice to buy two corner lots.
Aren't we all paying a small amount of all community projects, like the pool? I would use the pool. Small amount. I'd like to use the pool. Serve beer. But,
I'll look that in.
yeah, we're all paying a little bit for everything here.
but like Mike was saying, we're going to the 1 cent sales tax to try to do streets.
Yeah.
So that way, we're not raising the levy.
Right.
We're not raising property tax. So we're trying to help out everybody, and it's not going to help out everybody, because there's going to be a lot of places where we don't replace a street, but there's a lot of places where we all know they need replaced.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to do it with 1 cent sales tax to keep from raising property tax or mill levy or
I have an
utilities.
I have an option on the curb and gutter. If we want to kick the can, I can take one block out, which leaves the burden of all the curb and gutter on either the city and the county, and then there's only $420 on a single block, if you want to kick the can. It's not a bad idea. If I eliminate one block out of one of these options, the one that has the two bad trees, if I take that one out of that option, all the curb and gutter burden is on the county, except for $420 on the F block. It gives you time to decide. No, I don't disagree, and it's the worst block in town. I'm just throwing it out there as an option. We're ending this all on the overall picture, but that takes that out of the argument. You got $420 of private curb and gutter on block F to deal with. However, you can call that a precedent of $420, or you can say, we do it this way this time just to be able to get the work done. And I'm only saying, if we feel like we're rushing the decision on that thing or don't like what the discussion is, there is a possibility of changing
Did Gabe
on one option.
redo all the curb and gutter in front of his house?
On the shop.
Just the stuff, well, I know, but I didn't know if his house is done too,
It was just Heritage Lumber.
Okay.
But you're asking in this photograph.
Right, and
if
then
that's
you can't
new
really
there.
say, okay,
I
we're
don't
gonna
know.
pay for Joanne.
Looks
and-
good from there down.
And,
so.
I know, and Gabe, you already paid for yours, so, sorry.
You may have. You may have. Who's-
You know. Joanne Wellman, I think.
But you're setting the precedent going forward for everything you do.
Yeah, I
phase
know,
Yeah.
I know.
44 or whatever.
Jeff, I understood what you said, if you're guessing at $4,500 max per property owner, and that could be put on at least a 5-year table?
Yes.
That means that.
What would you figure?
And that's if you have to
lineal foot?
replace it all.
What's that?
We're not
So
saying that it
lineal
all has to
foot
be replaced.
On the curb and gutter?
150 per
Except
maximum
Sunny.
property owner.
No, I mean, what do you figure
But
per
What
I
foot?
know.
Oh,
Yeah.
35.
We're not there yet.
30
Yeah.
35 is
It
what
will
he's
be.
got in here.
Which they, you know, that's the, at least the sidewalk up there, I understand didn't have to be replaced, but.
Like on this J, on that one where Gabe's house is in that picture, would all that curb and gutter have to be replaced from like the corner of her property clear to the alley? Or would it just
It would
be?
be, you would basically leave this one and this one. It is so broke up and uneven throughout.
I mean, it looks like there'd be several sections there that'd have to come out, but.
It's basically the entire thing. I mean,
Okay.
and here's the thing, because of the way things are tilted and tipped, if you put 70 feet of new gutter, skip one, and pick up, the grade isn't going to work on something that's
Okay,
that
that's
ragged.
fine.
And that's why I gave the pictures too. Look at them by all
Yeah.
means.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can see.
And we're gonna run into this as we go.
Mhm.
This isn't isolated.
And by talking about that eliminating J, I have no interest, I don't want to do that, I just threw it out there. I mean, that is, in fact, probably the worst street, but it also has this situation that's on it.
There are a lot of drainage down that street too. A lot of drainage.
Oh,
down that
yeah,
street.
it's a
Yeah.
constant trickle street, and it's also got the spring in it that comes off of Jackson that runs out of it. That thing is a interesting street, to say the least.
Any further discussion?
Need a decision.
Yeah,
On the project alone,
on curb and gutter.
or
Curb and gutter.
overall?
Yeah,
Curb and gutter.
portion of the cost of
I
it.
thought it was voted on.
Well, yeah.
The motion was defeated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
So-
probably need to consider another motion or a different alternative. I'll let Lyda decide.
Lila, you're up. Well, you decide, what do you say?
If I
No,
get,
just-
if I get to vote,
I say we have to make a decision and stick to it, whatever it may be.
And that's,
This is, also, as you say, also doing is kicking
Change
the
it.
can down the road.
mid-course now, we're gonna have to change going forward.
And I understand what you're saying, K.O. and Larry, that if it's a little individual lady that's living off of Social Security only, it is a tough situation.
These
But-
are subject to protest.
Yeah, and it's still subject to protest, but then also, it's been the same forever, that ordinance.
And that ordinance not only applies to St. Francis, but Denver, Lakewood. The resident is responsible for the health strip.
that,
But
that's
not in
my,
Colby or not in a couple other towns that aren't far.
Really?
Yep.
Oh,
Los Angeles, city pays for it. Imagine that burden.
as a homeowner, even though I'm out in the county, it was pointed out, so, but if I were to buy even in the county, that's my understanding. I'm buying this property, that's my responsibility. I know that when I buy the property.
But you can't take the curb out. Say, I don't like that curb, I'm gonna take it out. You can't do that.
Yes, you can. Put another one in.
If you put another one in.
Yeah.
But you can't say, you know what, I just want a whole bunch of flowers along my curb, and take that curb out. You can't do that. The city requires you to have that there.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with my own, I'm good with that, but
Yeah.
it's more just, you work in a bank, you see people struggling, you know, and,
Yeah.
you know, yeah. I guess I can sell their home. I mean,
And I feel bad, like.
I feel bad about it.
I don't want
It's like,
somebody that's
gosh.
struggling to have to help pay for my curb and gutter. I mean, that was my
Yeah.
responsibility of buying a home,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that I should have to.
But everybody's
replace my
gonna be
curb and
paying
gutter.
this 1 cent tax, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's gonna be paying it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
some people aren't gonna get their street fixed, because
Mhm.
they don't need it fixed. They're still gonna be paying this tax.
how many people really buy a home and observe the curb and gutter and think, oh, that's my responsibility? I bet very few.
Very few.
Actually go
Yeah.
to that detail.
They should though.
They should, but I agree with you that a lot of people aren't thinking about that.
No.
But,
We don't think about replacing a hot water heater or a furnace, but we have to sometimes.
All right.
going back, I'm thinking that the only fair way is to leave it as it is because it's been that way. But I do feel like we could possibly figure out a way to help them out with little incidental like these trees and stuff that, so they aren't paying for both.
I'll tell you what, moving these 2 trees out here, you're gonna make the curb and gutter look pretty puny. The cost. I know it.
Well, you don't even have figures on what it would take to repair that tied in with this, do you?
What's that, I'm sorry?
To repair those trees, none of those costs are tied in with this,
Repair
right?
the street, oh, to remove, you mean? No.
To remove and then-
Repair, we're taking them out.
No, we're just talking lineal feet of curb and gutter.
So what do you think, 5,000 per tree? To get those out? Estimate?
I'd say between 3 and
7?
4,000, yeah. I mean,
Roots gotta go.
the sky's the limit if there's only one tree
100-year-old
trimmer.
trees.
Yeah. But 3 is probably a minimum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you got the expense of,
Those roots go all the way out into the street, which is obviously what's with it.
Yeah, you're
And
looking at-
You're going to have some fish, I would assume some pushback from the property owners.
Yeah.
That's
That and one of those
leaving this-
trees is probably his favorite shade tree too.
You bet.
Oh, yeah.
So we're gonna make someone very angry if we say, okay, you gotta pay for all this, you're gonna lose your shade, and we're gonna raise taxes on everything you buy.
You know, that one on G is gonna shade their backyard.
Yeah, that was one I was thinking of too.
In the city right away.
In the city right
Just
away.
throwing that out there.
Right, but it was planted
in the city
100
right
years
away.
ago,
If
so,
you
Yeah.
really want to get technical about it, it's the city street.
yeah.
Well, I shouldn't say that.
Because we know how you love trees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe the city shouldn't have allowed it to be planted 100 years ago.
Why couldn't these things have been the
Who was on
dead trees
council
that
100
you
years
use to
ago?
make them cut down anyway, because they're gonna fall on their house?
Well, that, when I look at property for people, I go there to look at the electrical, plumbing, everything like that, but if they got big trees, especially if they're when they're shared, that really gets hairy too, warm, and you could be spending a lot of money on this tree that you might not own half of. Just stuff like that, I don't know.
You know to look out for this stuff.
Huh?
You know to look out for this stuff, because you're in the business of building things, and you know all these things. A lot of people
I'm sure
don't.
there's other people who know how to look at property.
Well, yeah,
Besides the
in
assessor.
general.
Well, we
All right.
need to get this resolved, so, any further discussion, or do I entertain a motion again?
Guess I'll make a motion again that we leave it as it is and the curb and gutter is the homeowner's responsibility.
And I'll second it.
Okay, then moved by Amanda and second by Roger. And we'll vote again. Cale?
Nope.
Amanda?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Dara?
Yes.
Larry?
I'm still no.
As-
3-2, so it would pass. You leave it as is,
And it's subject to protest.
I don't know.
subject to protest.
So,
Yeah. Okay. I know it's a tough decision, and it's tough on everybody, so,
Do we put something
about the trees.
no, not at this time.
Not this time?
I think you pretty well,
But we
you don't
can.
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we all know the discussion on that, so when it comes to that point, we can discuss that with the property owner when it gets to that point. Okay, what's the next step we have to do? Is that is the
That's
main
it for
thing?
this evening. I
So
think
it could.
We need option A or
This
B.
evening?
This evening.
Oh, we got-
We've been here
Continue
that
to
long.
walk?
Time's over.
We've been here
Katie's
that long.
playing.
Okay, are the options A or B?
So let's just go ahead and name because we need to get this to the state.
Right.
We need to pick which one we want. This may change because of what the state says,
Right.
based on our explanation. So let's call the one that is $20,790 on the curb and gutter, let's call that one B. I apologize for not having designations on these, and the other one, of course, A, the
That would be
$38,000.
That would be the first set in, right?
Yeah, the one that says $20,790.
C and G.
Yep, that
Those
one's
are
option B. I was trying to convince myself one was better than the other and trying to write some pros and cons down. Option B, which is the $20,790, it doesn't tie up a huge amount of towns with all street improvements at one time. It breaks apart. And it does only deal with one of those trees, and I know we're not trying to make that an option, but it does only give us one protest area, so to speak, because the only other private one is the $420 on a single owner. So that's the pros for option B. I don't really have any cons for it, other than it's not showing a great big improvement in a large area. It's kind of scattered around. I don't see that as necessarily a negative. On the option A, obviously it shows great improvement right in the center of town all at one time, and that's more aesthetics than it is about this grant. I'm just pointing it out. The cons, of course, is it would be a mess for that time of construction throughout that entire area. And, of course, then that one would make us have the tree issue, which equates to the protest issue all at one time. So, honestly, I think there is less, a little less face value, if you will, on B, but I think it's probably the easier option as far as protest. I think it's probably, I would say B would be the better one to choose.
Yeah, and it's a smaller project, maybe, less expense to the property owner, and hopefully, once it's done and people see the improvement, see the results, that might very well encourage more community support.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by B? Which one are we actually looking at?
Here, this is the 20,000.
I like A.
Just write B on it. I'm sorry, like I said, I just got this information so late yesterday. What's that?
I like A because it takes care of the schools.
I don't disagree with that at all.
But
I've seen that.
if we did
Oh,
B,
Last 4
it would be
pages.
half of what that one would be. And then, like you said, we'd only have half the town tore up.
Yep,
That's what
One
he's
hand.
asking.
sure. And keep in mind, this may get changed by our application to Topeka. We may have to add some of these in and subtract something out because we can designate it a route to a given point.
That's, I guess that's where I'm looking
I
at.
can't imagine that they
This-
would discount.
To me, this looks more favorable for the grant, just
The A?
looking at
A does.
the location.
Okay.
I
With
mean-
the school being on there, I can't believe that wouldn't be the one that would give the most points.
I
It
mean,
will be a mess.
I'm just
I was
saying,
just trying to pick something,
Looking-
because I said
looking-
they were equal, but I was trying to write down some things. I don't think that is
I
like
mean,
I'd press.
I like B, don't get me wrong, but for appeasing to try to get a grant, this looks more appealing, I guess, to me, that we're,
Well,
you're by
no.
you're by the school, you're by the grocery store, you're by the courthouse, very thorough traffic way, and you've got the drainage issue.
Sure.
That, to me, if we're trying to get grant money to fund it, but that's what I'd like the input from.
So here's an
Mr. Dean, I
interesting
guess.
thought. Why don't we, with our reasons for each one, give Justine both of them?
Yeah.
We have a total project
Yeah.
here, and if either one is fine, then of course it's a personal preference, and if they
That's-
say one works and one doesn't, then
Yeah,
they choose.
that's where I'm at, if she
Yeah, I
would
agree
say
with
one
that
would,
too.
because not saying B would work, because.
I'm still trying to figure out, B is the.
First one.
20,000.
Yeah.
A is the 38,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, write it on there, so it's on there, damn it.
If JR would staple his, we could do the first one and second
Well,
one.
and I
And now we got
apologize.
B
Like
as
I
the
said,
first
I
one,
got
and
it
A
late
as the
yesterday.
second one.
There wouldn't be a
Well-
chance on B, weighing on in over there on the angle road to where we could do the bridge at the same time.
Absolutely, and that, I discussed that with the engineer, you can leave the area open and know you've left enough. I just didn't want to spend any money on that surfacing and then take it out.
Yeah.
That was the reason, so I think we deal with it either way. It might fit a phase 2 that's 2-3 years down the road with the bridge included at that point, so that's definitely a valid point.
Well, and the other thing, you know, you're down there, I can see more people, if we're raising a 1 cent sales tax, they're gonna say, well, there's really no residents right along there. Over here, we're covering a lot more area right in town that people are all complaining about. I don't hear them
Yeah.
complaining about
Nobody.
that street, Angle
I
Road.
agree.
The counter to that is the fact that in the long run, if you improve Angle Road, it's gonna save the rest of our streets.
That's true too. I mean, there's
All those
there-
harvesters
it's
that are
both
using
ways.
Engle Road are paying the 1 cent sales tax when they buy their whatever in town, their food or whatnot. So you're getting people that utilize that road probably that don't live here.
Does this sales tax apply to fuel too? Is there an overlap with all that at all?
I don't think so.
So that's established by the state.
That'd be by the
Fuel
state
tax,
and
yeah.
federal, yeah. I think all of it, yeah. Okay.
Is Benton what ones should we consider truck routes?
Benton's one of them.
I was
Right
just saying
now.
that too.
Okay, so I was
If we
gonna
fix
say-
Benton Street up, why don't we keep the trucks off of it?
Yeah, it would be
We need
nice.
to-
Benton's gonna be really hard to keep them off of.
Where it's
the
a
north
straight
side.
shot, but I didn't know. Make them go to Angle
Or would
Road,
there
come
be any
into
problem
town.
with sending both of them in and then see what?
As long as we have a decision by late next week, 'cause
Right.
you're gonna have to have a resolution ready for you Monday night, the 8th, right?
That needs the specifics on it?
Excuse me?
That, the resolution needs the specifics
Yeah.
on it? Okay, okay.
We identify the streets, we identify the costs.
I don't know that she can get it back from the state that fast. I mean, I guess,
Do we need
But
it
you-
back from
you
the
thought
state? We just
Justine
need
would
just
approve
talking to
either
her.
one.
Yeah,
Okay.
just asking her opinion of which one she
Okay.
thinks would be,
more
If-
doable. Yeah, well, I can get that
if-
probably even today.
if she thinks one would be more favorable, or if she thinks either one, then we would know.
And so, do you guys want me to, whatever she decides, that's what we're gonna go with, and then Mike can create his resolution?
When I get back from vacation on the 8th.
Well, seeing I'm leaving Wednesday,
For how
so
long?
I'll be back for the council meeting. I'll be back Sunday.
You'll be back that Monday?
Yes.
Both be coming back that Monday?
Yes.
JR won't be, he's gonna, you know.
But if you guys
JR's flying
make the
home right now.
decision that you're gonna go with Justine's recommendation, if you
Why-
make that
why don't
decision,
you
then you
make
can
it?
do that.
Whichever one, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah.
mean to interrupt
No, that's fine.
you. Like you said, whatever, if Justine says that A will work, go with it, but if she says B would work better,
What if she says either one is fine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
if
Let's
either
make,
one,
let's
If
make,
either one,
Either
if either
one.
one
Oh,
would
either one.
work,
Then-
then
then-
we need to
then
make the
we-
decision. Let's make a decision
I
of
thought
we,
the consensus was on A.
okay,
Maybe it wasn't.
we
maybe if
probably
we
need
make
to
that,
vote.
what's that?
Let's vote on that. Let's get this,
Protest,
Well, I was
if
just
we
gonna
don't
say,
wanna
let's
deal with the
say
potential of
what we
protest,
would,
A's out.
which one we would,
Yeah.
B is the less controversial. Let
we
you
would
give
like
less
better,
power
but
to
if
the
she thinks,
individual
if we
to
all
say,
like
what's
A,
one,
but she
two,
thinks
one,
B
one,
would
on this block.
be better, then we go with
That's
her
easier for
recommendation. If she doesn't have one,
Which
then we
significantly
have a
costs
decision.
per
hmm
location.
that's
Is
what
that-
I need.
Yeah. Does that
I
sound
mean,
right?
you almost ask for that
And the
protest.
tree issue is
We
not
decide
really
which
a
one we
severe-
would
You have one
Except for
block.
Jay.
recommend
Which-
and let
which we can
Justine
eliminate because
think
it's
the
gotta
other
be
one would
over
be
the
more
budget,
favorable to
and I
go
don't
through
wanna
than
do that.
to
I'm
go with the
just simply
recommendation.
saying, we are
Yeah.
73,000 over our target.
Go with it.
Yep, gotcha.
JR, unlike A and B, when I look at it too, I mean, if I'm the contractor, I'd love A because you're going straight through and you're getting several blocks in a row for tear out and putting back. So if we do B and then we come back and try to get on both ends of that, that's a little more expensive for them because then they've got to stop and finish, stop and finish. Where if you got 4 blocks in a row,
Actually, you're only adding 2 blocks that are in a line on
Yeah.
A, and I'm not arguing for or against it. I'm still stuck on the protestability of A.
Yeah.
That you're giving the power to not do those things, and who knows? It's
But
a
let's-
guessing game.
Let's deal with it. Let's get it out there and deal with it. You know,
All we need to say is which one we prefer.
it represents the community, it's democracy. If they come and raise hell about it, okay, we'll do it.
Good enough for me.
Do they know where your house is?
They're gonna know where your house is.
Put some orange cones in front of it, you know, they can just drive around and wherever the cones are at.
Okay, who likes project A? Raise their hand.
It's like you say.
Okay. I think,
And we'll see if we can put both of them in front of them just for the feel on it. I mean, if
Well,
we-
that's why I said if Justine thinks B would be more favorable to pass, I mean, I'm not against either one, I just like the. but-
So does everybody agree with that, if Justine
Yeah.
thinks
Justine
B's better?
thinks-
Yes.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
yeah, we've got to try to
Whatever
get
gets through.
Yeah, we gotta get it through.
You bugging me on
What?
that?
Because I have to go with the
Our
recommendation.
first project is the only chance we have of getting
I'll do it the first week off.
This round,
This
yes.
round,
So
yeah.
we gotta go with what she says.
Okay.
I say if she thinks B is a better option, then
Yeah.
we go with it, but
We,
we prefer A.
we're preferring A, but if she says it's B, then
Yep.
we're going
Sounds
with
good to
B.
me.
Okay.
And we're still not going to make everybody happy in town for a long time. It's going to be a long process.
We're not
We
great
just
fans.
need about 15 million, that's all.
Per lot.
15 million.
Win the lottery and knock us out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or actually, it's four. So this is the whole block. That's both sides of the
How
whole block.
long would it take you to go through A and B and identify the block?
I'm at another
That's it,
meeting
that's
at
it, the
9
address,
Really?
the owner.
with the,
Yeah, or
Yeah, I've got all those. It's just in the rough information.
we'll make it.
Well, unless they're early.
it'd make it easier, I think.
I told Scott, I said, I had a schedule, and I'm not there, I'll come in.
Yeah, I'll just go back through these.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Amanda.
You want me to?
Second.
Second by
Doesn't
Pierre.
look like it, right?
Yeah, that's the only thing we can discuss anyway.
Go through and
Okay,
take this
thanks,
number,
everybody.
four different addresses,
Yep.
associated addresses.
Tough one.
Have a happy Friday.
No, you want me to,
Thank you.
Thank you.
you can do a reply all. Well, no, let me think about, yes, you can, because that wasn't,
It responded to my email. I'm not certain, but it is what I am wanting from them as far as cost share on US 36.
Yeah.
He's not sure, but that's what he's wanting?
Yeah, that's what he's